There are 63 conference games in the Big Ten, and you can argue that this is one of the three most important. Unless we've got a monumental upset at the Big Ten championship game in Indianapolis the first Saturday of December, the West is not winning. Therefore, it's Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State, Michigan. And here we are. Happy Valley on Saturday, big noon kickoff on Fox, and it's the Buckeyes in town to take on the Nittany Lions. And we're going to talk Penn State football for the next 60 or so, something in that range. Please leave your comments and questions there in the live chat. And we got our post-game hosts here for Penn State football here at the Voice of College Football. We got Marty Leap from Black Shoe Diaries and awaiting Tim Aiden from also Black Shoe Diaries. Marty, how are you?
Good, Mark. Looking forward to talking about some football. Big game on Saturday. Like you said, always one of the not just one of the most important games of the year in the Big Ten, but most years one of the most enjoyable, coming down to the wire type of games in the Big Ten also. So looking forward to talking about it.
And one of the most watched games of the year, not just in the Big Ten, in the country every year. If you go to the TV ratings, folks, if you're into that, the SEC and the Big Ten dominate the ratings. And between Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State, those three games and those three teams playing other teams, there are the ones that get watched the most, especially, again, this one. All right, Marty, I'm going to throw it out there right out of the gate. The big picture is that this is a hurdle that James Franklin has cleared once. And of course, that led to a big season, a Rose Bowl, a Big Ten championship. Otherwise, Michigan got it done last year against Ohio State, but the Buckeyes still considered the standard in the conference. And Penn State has played Ohio State tougher. Michigan fans don't want to hear this, but Penn State has played Ohio State consistently tougher than any team in the conference. But again, I believe it's 1-7 with James Franklin at the helm.
Yeah, I think that's part of what makes this series so frustrating for James Franklin and for Penn State fans is, like you said, Penn State plays Ohio State tougher than any other team in the Big Ten. Obviously, James Franklin would never say this, but he realizes that this is the biggest game of the year every year for Penn State. If Penn State wants to get to that next level as a college football playoff contender, as a, quote unquote elite program, and they've been on the doorstep of it under Franklin. If they want to get there, it comes down to beating Ohio State consistently. They need to be the Buckeyes, not just beat the Buckeyes. They need to be the Buckeyes. They need to function the way Ohio State does. This is something Tim and I touched on a little bit on our post-game show last Saturday when we started to look ahead to this one. Ohio State operates on a different level than the rest of the Big Ten. They operate like an SEC school, and Penn State and Michigan aren't far behind, but they're far enough behind that Ohio State has run this conference the last 10 plus years. And yeah, like you said, James Franklin 1-7 against Ohio State, easily could have more wins. His first year lost in double overtime in a whiteout that just had horrendous officiating. 2017 and 2018 blew double-digit fourth quarter leads and lost both those games by 1 point. I think a lot of Penn State fans, myself included, would tell you that 2017 game in Columbus is one of the biggest what-ifs of the last probably 2 decades in program history. Because if Penn State wins that game, you have back-to-back wins over Ohio State. They would have gone to the college football playoff in 2017. And that's the type of win that could have changed this entire program, really put Penn State on probably level footing with Ohio State in the Big Ten. And, ever since that year, followed up by the 1-point loss in 2018, they've never really been able to get back to that level. They've continued to play the Buckeyes tough, but this is a big opportunity for Penn State on Saturday. This is the first time they played Ohio State in Beaver Stadium with fans there since 2018. And I think that's definitely going to be a huge factor. So yeah, this is a tremendous opportunity for the Nittany Lions on Saturday to come out and just establish themselves as the program they were, or show they're still the program they were from 2016 through 2019, when they won 11 games 3 out of the 4 years and beat the Buckeyes along the way.
James Franklin said some words after one of those 2 games. I forget if it was the 2017 game in Columbus or the next year in 18, but one of the 1-point losses. I'm sure you.
It was 2018. I know what you're talking about.
Okay, we've got a great program. They've got an elite program. We need to get to elite. and there's nothing wrong with what he had to say. I wouldn't have used his terminology in terms of great. When I think great, I mean, I'm thinking you're competing for national championships. But anyway, he gave great a certain status and elite a higher status. So it was understandable to everyone. So no big deal there. But when you make that statement, then it's on record. It's in an age in which people are going to record it. It's there. It's to be circulated. And then if you don't reach that plateau, that milestone that you're looking for, and surpass that other program, then that can potentially be brought back, as it was, I believe, this week.
Yeah, it was brought up at his Tuesday press conference this week. Just, basically the question is presented. It's been 4 years since that comment was made. Do you feel like the program has made progress toward it? That sort of thing. And it's a touchy subject in Happy Valley. It really is. I think a lot of people who cover the team, a lot of insiders would agree that there wasn't necessarily anything wrong with what he said, but that's more of a behind closed doors kind of statement you make to your team, to your staff, to your coaches. And since then, Penn State going into that was something like 36-5 in the previous 41 games. Since then, I believe they're like 33-17. So that to make that comment and follow it up with that type of run is not what anybody wants to see. But that said, if they want to make that jump from great to elite, and, Tim, I'm sure you'll agree with me, it's hard to believe it's been 4 years already since that speech was given. This Saturday presents you that opportunity, because you have that loss against Michigan, but if you can beat Ohio State, you put yourself in position to go 11-1, and with some help along the way, potentially still get to Indianapolis and put yourself right there for a college football playoff berth.
Hey, Tim, good to see you. That's Tim Maiden from Black Shoe Diaries. Joins Marty, of course, after the Penn State games to provide us with post-game here at the Voice of College Football. So we appreciate Tim and Marty's contribution here to make that possible for us for Penn State post-game. Yeah, Tim, we've basically just been talking the Ohio State narrative. That's been the big stumbling block, the big challenge. And Penn State has, to its credit, played Ohio State tougher than anybody in the Big Ten, including Michigan, consistently. But it's 7 out of 8 in the loss column.
Yeah, and as someone who was at the last win, the 2016 whiteout win, it's kind of hard to believe that there hasn't been another win since then. And of course, there were a couple, I'm sure Marty touched on it before I got on, but 2017, 2018 were huge missed opportunities for Penn State to, get notch another big win over the Buckeyes and, really establish himself as that team that can challenge the longtime kings of the Big Ten to the throne. But as we all know, JT Barrett turned into a video game in the fourth quarter in 2017. And then 2018, Penn State once again do a double digit fourth quarter lead in the final 8 minutes as Ryan Day, who was then offensive coordinator, figured out, you can just screen past Penn State to death and they'll have no way to stop it. And then, of course, there's the infamous 4th and 5 call, which, just go look it up on YouTube if you like self-torture. But, ever since then, though, it just Penn State hasn't quite come as close to knocking them off. I know 2019, they did a nice job rallying back after getting down 21-zip. The defense forced a couple fumbles. Will Levis actually did an admirable job stepping in when Sean Clifford got knocked out of the game. And, they cut it down to a 21-17 game. But then Ohio State responded with a touchdown of their own fourth quarter and just kind of held off Penn State. And then 2020 was just Penn State was coming off just a devastating loss to Indiana in overtime on what I will maintain as long as I live was Michael Penix was short. That 2-point conversion should not have counted. But nonetheless, it did, according to the officials, and Penn State's coming in hungover at 0-1 instead of 1-0. Ohio State, with no with no crowd there, because this was, of course, during the pre-vaccine era of COVID, with no screaming whiteout crowd there, they were able to just do whatever the heck they wanted. Took a big lead early, and Penn State did a nice job. I know Jahan Dotson had a couple ridiculous circus catches, which led to touchdowns, which made the final score a little more respectable. But Ohio State really dominated that game. And then last year was, Penn State did a good job of, hanging around. They gave themselves a chance in the fourth quarter. It seemed like at one point, I remember it was the 6-point game. They threw a look, maybe like it was a screen pass that went 70 yards for a touchdown to John Lovett, but then the referees ruled that he had set a foot out of bounds, or he had stepped out of bounds before catching the pass, which made him an ineligible receiver, and that got called back. And Ohio State eventually iced it with a field goal. So, what happens this weekend? Well, I guess you'll have to go to blacksheepdiaries.com on Friday to see our prediction roundtable. But, again, the real key to the game is, if Penn State's gonna have a chance of winning this, they gotta hang around. You gotta be down by no more than 7 to 10 points going into the fourth quarter. Keep yourself in striking distance. Easier said than done, with the amount of weapons Ohio State brings offensively, and not even include Jackson Smith, the Jigba, supposedly being available this Saturday.
You guys know the mentality of college football fans. It's basically, there are no good teams in college football. There are like 3 great teams, and then everybody else is trash. And so as soon as Penn State lost at Michigan, and I know that was not pretty. They were just whipped on the line of scrimmage. And it's football. It's not baseball, where you can say, well, let's throw out another pitcher tomorrow, and, let's see how we play the next 10 days and see if we can win 6 out of 10 or 7 out of 10. It's your one shot, and Michigan's obviously better than Penn State by that much, which I don't truly believe, but that's what the result was, and that was the performance on the field. So Penn State gets now its second big shot, this time at home against Ohio State, a much different style team. But how truly good do you guys think? Maybe before I serve it up to the experts, I'll give you my quick take on Penn State, because I think this is a really good team. I don't know if it's an elite team. I think it's probably a top 15 team in the country. And obviously the big difference from last year and the last several years to this year is that you've got a capable offensive line in terms of run blocking with Nick Singleton and Katron Allen. And so suddenly there's this actual complete offense, instead of, well, we got to let Sean Clifford try to throw for 300 yards and then scramble around and maybe for 50 or 60, because we've got no running game from the running back position. So that's a huge difference. And I will be fascinated to see what I consider to be the best secondary in the Big Ten, and probably a top 5 to 10 unit in the country at Penn State, face arguably the best wide receiver unit in the country. And then even on the flip side, a very capable Penn State receiving core with Tinsley and Washington and Strange and on down the line, take on an Ohio State, a very talented secondary, of course, but a bit thin, a bit banged up, and not a unit that's really excelling. I think the skill position matchups are going to be exceptional.
Yeah, you mentioned Penn State secondary, which I agree with you. It's the best in the Big Ten, could be one of the best in the country, maybe the best in the country. But a buddy of mine and I were talking about this the other day, and it just goes to show how deep and talented Ohio State is, even with, Joey Porter Jr., who might be the first cornerback off the board in April, Kalen King, who might be a first-round pick at cornerback next year, Johnny Dixon, who's going to have a long NFL career at cornerback, Tig Brown, who's going to have a long NFL career at safety. You're still sitting here saying, how in the world are they going to cover all these Ohio State receivers? And that's if Jackson Smith and Jigba doesn't play. You're still saying, how in the world are they going to cover these guys? So I think that's going to be a really fun matchup to watch. I'm not necessarily saying this is the best secondary in the country and the best wide receiver crew in the country, even though I think they might be. I do think, though, this is going to be the best secondary v receiver crew matchup you'll see all year. When it comes to iron sharpens iron, you're not going to find a much more intriguing, intense battle than Penn State's secondary against Ohio State's wide receivers.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd agree with Marty. This is if you like games, you don't have to be a Penn State or Ohio State fan. If you like seeing games where it's strength on strength, you'll want to tune into Fox's big noon kickoff on Saturday when they come to Happy Valley. Because talking about the wide receiving core of Ohio State's, which just, they just stack 5-star upon 5-star upon 5-star. And then Penn State secondary, which leads the country in pass breakups. And it's not even close as to who's in second. I think it's Illinois. But I remember seeing, I don't know what the stats are now, Mark. I don't know if you've looked it up, but I remember this was maybe last month, but Penn State was like number one, and then the next best team was like 20 breakups behind them, something ridiculous like that. So, this is a team that, they'll break up a lot of passes. They get their share of interceptions. I'm really excited to see, how Manny Diaz's, feast or famine system holds up against these guys. We've seen teams like we saw Iowa last week kind of show a blueprint on how you can at least slow them down a little bit. They're going to move the ball, of course, but you can maybe slow them down a bit in the red zone, force them to settle for field goals instead of touchdowns. Of course, Iowa doesn't have an offense, so that, it's not like they were a real threat to win that game. But, Penn State does have an offense, as we've seen from last week. So, if they're, again, I think it goes back to I talked about before, if they're going to keep this, like, say within 7 to 10 points going into the fourth quarter with a chance to steal it, they're going to have to, slow them down as they get into the red zone, not allow them to finish drives in the end zone. And of course, they can get some good pressure on CJ Stroud or, force him to make a bad throw, even get a sack, maybe can strip the ball from him. You just want to see this defense just ball out the way they're capable of balling out. And now, of course, we have talked about the receivers a lot, but Buckeyes do bring a pair of solid running backs themselves. Trevion Henderson, who's the lightning to the thunder, which is Mayan Williams, who's been like a wrecking ball against opposing defenses. So it's an interesting contrast. I know they both kind of had quiet games last week against Iowa, but there's still two very capable guys that you got to be careful of. So curious to see if they can, if they can stop them from running wild, like, Michigan's backs did, like Blake Corman, Donovan Edwards were able to.
Yeah, I can just about guarantee that Trevion Henderson and Mayan Williams have never experienced a day like they experienced against Iowa last week, because we've watched them in college now for 2 to 3 years for Mayan Williams, and they haven't at Ohio State. And obviously they were studs in high school. And I'm sure going all the way back to Pee Wee football, they never experienced a day like they had against the Iowa defense. So if there's anything that Manny Diaz can grasp from what Iowa did and try to replicate that in stopping the run while maintaining, and relying on a great secondary to maybe man up, that might be the way to go, because it was tough sledding. Mayan Williams had 10 carries for 19 yards in that game, and he's just been dragging guys down the field all season.
That was shocking to see. I didn't think they'd be held in check that much by any team.
No, I was just going to say, I think you kind of said it laid out a little bit of a blueprint of what Penn State can look to do. I will say, Saturday, if Ohio State's offense plays the way they played against Iowa, this is going to be a game that's going to be very close to Penn State can win. Because if Ohio State's offense is one of the best in the country, one of the most talented I've ever seen, but Iowa held them to 5.6 yards per play, I believe it was, forced 2 turnovers, like you said, Tim, holding them to field goals in the red zone. But Iowa's offense is so incompetent, it didn't matter. Like, it sounds weird to say a defense played well and gave up 54 points, but Iowa's defense played really well. their offense is just horrible. So if Penn State's defense can have anywhere near the success Iowa's did, you pair that with not just a competent offense, but an offense that last week in Minnesota looked like it was starting to get back into some rhythm, hitting some chunk plays like they did early in the year, and throw in a hostile road environment on top of that. And the Buckeyes could, I'm not saying they'll lose the game, but they would find themselves in a dogfight late into the fourth quarter. That's for certain.
I do see a comment from our old pal Mike Ford saying, just hope that Diaz doesn't try to go zone. That'll be the death of them. Yeah, I agree, Mike. I would hope that Diaz tries to, again, if you have one of the best secondaries in the Big Ten, probably one of the best in the country, hands down. So you trust him enough to go man to man against these guys, and you know what? Doesn't work out. It doesn't work out. But I agree. Yeah, just don't be. Hopefully, they won't be going to the zone, because that's just easy for Stroud and company to pick apart.
Aside from this matchup, just to add on to the Iowa narrative, somebody ran some metrics, and this Iowa offense continues just to give us metrics that are mind blowing. Like you can't fathom that there can be such a deplorable unit. It's unbelievable. Like I have people commenting on Iowa's offense that typically ignore Iowa football, don't even know they exist. They're like, in the ACC somewhere, but it's become such a national joke. It's just so awful. Somebody ran a metric that if Iowa would have punted on the first play that they got the ball every series, if they would have not given up and punted, they would have been more effective for their defense than they were by trying to run an offense and turning the ball over 6 times in horrible field position. That's how awful they are. And of course, they didn't score the touchdown. The defense scored the touchdown. It's incredible.
Well, there you go. I think you may have just given Kirk Ferentz and Brian Ferentz the solve to their problems. Just punt away.
Yeah, they got a great punter. Use him, I guess. So what are you guys most concerned with? So, we saw Sean Clifford. I think his numbers against Michigan were 7 for 19. And of course, if people didn't watch the game or they don't understand football, of course, I heard the Sean Clifford bashing the next day, and you guys, I'm sure, did as well. And I'm not saying he played a great game, but I watched every play of that game until very late in the game. And what I saw was him just basically bailing and needing to just get rid of the football. He was just under attack most of the time. And so pass protection, this Ohio State defensive line is finally living up to its billing and its 5-star decoration of players up there. So that's obviously a challenge.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a concern. I don't worry quite as much as I have in the past about Ohio State's pass rush. I know it hasn't been as effective this year for the Buckeyes as they had hoped. And, I said this whenever I was on here with you guys previewing the Michigan game, and it completely backfired in that game, but it bounced back against Michigan or against Minnesota. This Penn State offensive line is pretty good. It's the best one they've had in quite a while. So I think you combine the Penn State offensive line being the best they've had in a while with Ohio State's pass rush not being quite as deadly as recent years. And I think they could be okay there. Honestly, my biggest concern is Penn State going to be able to go score for them, more so on the front of who's going to make the plays for Penn State a wide receiver. As you mentioned earlier, Mark, Parker Washington, Mitchell Tinsley, Brenton Strange, we saw Theo Johnson start to really look healthy for the first time all year last week. There's some good players there. They don't have that true number one. In the past when Penn State has had the explosive offense, I think a lot of people think of the James Franklin era. They had Deshaun Hamilton, Chris Godwin, KJ Hamler, Jahan Dotson, all guys who have gone on to just be dudes in the NFL as well. They don't have that right now. They don't have that true number one, take the top off the defense, make the chunk play guy. And that's probably my biggest concern, to where I think they can slow Ohio State's offense down enough to have a chance. I'm not sure, because of the lack of part of the reason being the lack of a true number one receiver and the ability for those big explosive plays with consistency, that their offense is going to be able to go score for score with Ohio State. And with Clifford, yeah, Sean Clifford's coming off what I would say last week was, even after a slow start, was the best game of his career. But we've seen it before with Clifford. Mark, you mentioned we were previewing the Michigan game. One drive, he could look like he's never picked a football up before in his life. And the next drive, he takes over down 4 with a minute and a half to go and goes 7 of 7 for 80 yards and a score. It's the inconsistency. And this isn't a game where you can have the inconsistency. Even against Minnesota, there still was a pass or two where he had a guy open and missed it. You can't do that in a game like this against Ohio State. Every opportunity that's there, you've got to jump on it. I'm just not sure this offense is quite built yet to do that.
So I will add, Marty, as far, for the concerns about the receiver and lack of a deep threat, I think we saw last week against Minnesota to sort of make up for that was going to the tight ends a lot. It seems like they we all this talk of offseason about how they have the best tight end room in the country. And, you saw it to some extent throughout the season, but you didn't see it explode like it did last Saturday night. So with Theo Johnson having, his career best game and, 5 catches, 75 yards, and a touchdown. Then he had that nice touchdown strike to Tyler Warren. So it was great to see. I think Brenton Strange caught a pass too, but, so 7 catches from tight ends, a couple touchdowns. I don't know how many targets they had, but it seems like obviously they were targeted. They seem to be targeted a lot more than they had been in any other game this season. And I hope going forward, that becomes a thing. It can help if an opposing defense has to start accounting for the tight ends and in addition to the receiver, then at least it'll it can maybe free up someone like Parker Washington, Mitchell Tinsley to make a play. Of course, I realize it's not the same thing as having a deep threat, but at least having more options out there to throw to can help.
We are talking Penn State football right here at the Voice of College Football. And we will take your comments and questions, of course, in the live chat. You guys out there ultimately produce the show. We got Tim Aiden here and also Marty Leap from Black Shoe Diaries. And we are so appreciative to them because they provide our Penn State post game here at the Voice of College Football. So after the game on Saturday, we will have that post right here on the main channel. We will simulcast over on the Penn State channel as well after Penn State and Ohio State walk off the field. All right. Is there anything that you guys saw in the Michigan game from a coaching standpoint that you didn't like? Or was it just, hey, we got our butts whipped, that's what it was? Was it anything from a tactical standpoint that you didn't agree with? And I see the laugh out of Marty.
Yeah,
Marty, you got this.
Yeah, Tim and I talked about this extensively. Manny Diaz drove me insane in that game. You have, as I mentioned, one of the best cornerback duos in the country in Kalen King and Joey Porter. Put them out there on an island, especially with J.J. McCarthy still being a bit unproven, and stack the box. Not only did they not do that, they had their safeties playing like 15 yards off the line of scrimmage against a team who you knew they were going to line up and trying to run it down your throats. That was pretty maddening to not adjust to that at all, especially when you went into the second quarter, or the third quarter, excuse me, and you took a lead, 3 or 4 minutes into the second half, and you could have adjusted and tried to slow the running game down, and they didn't. Offensively, I think it was kind of more of they came out, tried to establish a run. They didn't. They fell behind. Michigan's defense was able to just kind of start doing what they wanted, and things snowballed on them. But, yeah, Manny Diaz, to his credit, the defense, partially because of his game plan, bounced back tremendously against Minnesota. But that definitely was not a game film that Manny Diaz is ever going to be showing anybody one day. Next time Manny Diaz interviews for a head coaching position, he's going to hope they don't watch that Michigan game. I can tell you that.
Well, I think he learned his lesson from that because it looked like they stacked the box against Minnesota, knowing that if you can contain Mo Ibrahim, you basically contain that offense because they didn't have any receivers who could burn them. They were starting a first time starter at quarterback in the whiteout of all environments. So, and Kirk Shiraka, kind of a uber conservative play calling there too, which definitely helped. But Yeah, I also would say I really did not like whatever plan Mike Yursich had at Michigan. I mean, I think they ran it the first 3 times. I mean, if they had come out, trying to fire away to the tight ends like they did against Minnesota, they could have. They basically were doing what they did against Minnesota: go to the tight ends, screen pass to Nick Singleton. I mean, look, they probably weren't going to win regardless because of how the defense is getting gashed by Michigan's ground game. But final score could have looked more respectable. It wouldn't have been as embarrassing of a loss as it turned out to be. But like I said, going forward, it seems like at least for last weekend, they both learned their lessons and tried something different.
We have focused so much on the Penn State secondary. How do you guys feel about the other 2 levels of the defense?
So
I would say, D-line, especially if Chop Robinson is back, and I thought I read something in practice reports he was practicing again.
He was a full participant at practice tonight, and
that's really good news.
For Saturday.
I think it's got to be all hands on deck for this game. So getting Chop back is huge. I really like the edge rushers, Chop, Disa Isaac, Denai Dennis Sutton. He's been getting more and more run as the season goes on. And, it's just fun to see him like drag an opposing offensive lineman with him and just kind of like crash him into the quarterback or whoever's carrying the ball. Like he's, I don't know, some Jackie Chan movie or something, but it's like, I do like what they've got on the D line overall. Linebacker is the shakiest part of this defense, especially that middle of the field. If you're able, you can definitely kill Penn State with some good crossing routes if you're capable of doing that. Tower Ellison, don't want to pick on it, but he's been either out of position or he takes himself out of the play by being a little too aggressive. Curtis Jacobs, though, I mean, tremendous job leading that group. And he acts as like an extra edge rusher in Manny's defense a lot. And we've seen him get some sacks or at least get some real pressure on the quarterback and force him into throwing it away or making a bad throw that leads to a turnover. So, and as far as, Abdul Carter, of course, he's another guy who's emerged. I mean, as the season's gone on, and he'll be a fun one to watch the next couple of years. But there is a bit of a depth issue right now with the linebacking core, and that's definitely been exploited at times. And I'm sure Ohio State will be able to exploit that again on Saturday. So that's why Martin was saying too, it's imperative that the offense is able to keep pace enough and not let this game get out of hand.
Yeah, I agree completely. But one thing I will add with the linebackers is this past Saturday, we finally saw them start to make a concentrated effort to get Curtis Jacobs and Abdul Carter on the field together more. Abdul Carter is a true freshman who has not looked like a true freshman. He was given number 11, and at Penn State, you don't just get given number 11 as a linebacker. Very, very few linebackers get to wear number 11 at Penn State. Micah Parsons wore number 11. Brandon Bell wore number 11 when they won the Big Ten in 2016. LeVar Arrington was number 11. You have to earn it. And
Navarro Bowman.
Yeah, Navarro Bowman. Yeah, I totally forgot Bowman wore 11 his final year on campus. Yeah, he's earned the sticks, and to earn that as a true freshman says something. You gotta
have LeVar's blessing to rock the number 11 jersey.
You really do. And last week we saw Curtis Jacobs play probably the best game of his career. And I don't think it was a coincidence that was with Jacobs playing at the Sam linebacker spot where he played most of last year instead of the Will where he's been this year. And that opened up the door for Abdul Carter to play the Will more, which in this defense, you want your Will linebacker to kind of be that game wrecker, the guy who goes and gets the quarterback. And that's what Carter excels at right now. So I'm hoping that Saturday we continue. I'm assuming you're going to see a lot of nickel anyway with the way Ohio State's going to want to throw the ball with their receivers. So you're probably going to be in a lot of nickel anyhow. So I'm hoping we see a lot of Curtis Jacobs at the Sam and Abdul Carter at the Will as your two linebackers on the field on Saturday. Because not only are they Penn State's two best linebackers, there's probably an argument to be made that they're two of Penn State's best, 5 defensive players.
No doubt. And I don't mean to keep rehashing the Minnesota game, but I saw Mark flash a comment there just not too long ago. It said, was Penn State really tested last week by Minnesota? They're playing their number 2 quarterback. And I mean, yeah, they probably didn't get the test they would have gotten had Tanner Morgan been healthy and available. Well, that being said, I know, Marty, you predicted Minnesota win. I predicted a close, ugly win for Penn State. Just knowing the history of Penn State coming off that first loss under James Franklin, they tend to be hung over the following week. And, we saw last year the worst of it when, the Illinois game. So that was definitely on our minds. And, the fact that they were able to go out there and blow them away like, it made like a good team probably should over a depleted team like Minnesota, that was definitely a nice relief, very cathartic, I would say. I'm sure Marty would probably agree with me on that one.
Yeah, absolutely. It was good to see. That's been a big problem in the James Franklin era, coming off of losses, coming off of byes. 2 times they've really struggled. So it was good to see them not just come off the loss, the victory, but with a resounding victory. And yeah, Minnesota wasn't with Tanner Morgan, but as much as the offense struggled, that takes nothing away from what is a very solid top half of the Big Ten Minnesota defense that Penn State just outside of 3 possessions completely just exposed.
Marty, you picked Minnesota to win?
I did. I forget what the exact number is, but I believe James Franklin I know in his career at Penn State, this is year 9. The first 8 years, he's lost back-to-back games at least once in 6 of the 8. He's below 500, both against the spread coming off of losses. And my fear was Mo Ibrahim was going to come out and just run all over them the way Michigan did. And to their credit, they didn't let that happen. So it was some very delicious crow that I was eating on Saturday night.
But that was good crow.
Oh, it was the best kind.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Good to be wrong about your team when you're under selling them. Yeah, that was one of those games where, and I don't promote myself to be some kind of betting genius by any stretch, but because we've all seen those lines and we see maybe 1 or 2 a week where we're like, really? Oh man, I'm going to pounce on that because what are they thinking? And usually we get tripped up on those because Vegas knew more than we did about something. But that was one of those lines where I thought they're only a 4-point favorite. I think they're going to run away with this. So yes, Penn State and Minnesota. So Sean Clifford, I saw about a third of the game, and Sean Clifford had a nice game, 3 for 295, 23 for 31. Understand there was some booing during the game. So first of all, sometimes you hear those reports and it's really not that big a deal. There's 12 people in a corner somewhere. Other times it's pretty egregious. So that's my first ask is about the booing. And just secondly, I hate to hear that because I've almost turned into a Sean Clifford apologist on here for like 3 years just to say, hey, I'm not selling him as a Heisman Trophy candidate, but he plays injured. He's a leader. He's tough. He gets out there. He plays well. He's led a lot of big victories and really good teams in the past. So kind of get off his back.
Yeah, as someone who was there at the game on Saturday,
yeah,
I can tell you. So there were reports that during the announcement of the starting lineups that Franklin and Clifford got booed, and I mean it's a little it's a little bit exaggerated. I'd say when they got introduced, it was kind of like muted. Like you hear a few cheers, some boos, but it wasn't like clear stadium wide booing for either of them. Now I will say when Cliff threw that interception early on, which damn near became a pick 6, there was a lot of booing then. So I'd say if the boos were really loud, it was for that moment. But otherwise, I mean, it was kind of muted for the starting lineups part. But of course, after the first quarter, those boos definitely were turning into cheers when Cliff was hitting his guys in stride and the offense was humming.
Yeah, I know on TV. I mean, obviously they don't show the teams being announced or anything of that nature, but after the Sean Clifford interception, the boos were definitely pretty audible and pretty loud on TV. But if you're playing in a whiteout crowd or any sort of crowd like that, you're the home team, you start that slow. Your quarterback could be Patrick Mahomes. You're probably going to get some boos after that interception just because the crowd's going to be getting restless. But hey, kudos to Sean Clifford for bouncing back the way he did after starting slow and the boos and everything like that to put together, like I said, in my opinion, the best game of his career. And I did think it was kind of funny at his press conference on Tuesday. James Franklin mentioned that Sean Clifford was Big Ten Offensive Player of the Week and then paused for a good 5 or 6 seconds before anyone said anything else. So it was almost kind of like one of those just I told you so kind of moments by Franklin, because after that interception, I mean, it was up and down social media. It was the point where I think even a lot of the press who cover Penn State expected Clifford to be pulled for Drew Allar, and he wasn't. And that decision paid off for Franklin.
What do you think is going to have to happen for that to be the decision to go to Drew Allar?
I think at this point, you probably have to see Sean Clifford get hurt. You look at Penn State where they're at with their season, with their schedule. You're setting at 6-1. You're welcoming Ohio State to town. You're probably going to lose this Saturday, and if you don't, it's a big reason why is because Sean Clifford probably just absolutely balled out, and he's obviously not going to lose his job at that point. But even if you lose, I don't see them losing again. Probably they're going to be favored and potentially by double digits in each of their remaining games. So I don't think, short of a Clifford injury, or maybe if they're down 21-3 and the offense is just really sputtering, trying something to jumpstart them. But at this point, I think to actually see Clifford, see Drew Allar become the starter, I think it had more to do with Clifford getting injured than it would anything else.
I'll say I predicted after the Purdue game that Drew Allar would be the starter by season's end, and that was predicated upon Cliff's history of just getting banged up so badly that he's just not effective. And I guess there's still time for that to happen, but yeah, I agree. I think if Drew Allar is starting, it's because Cliff is just hurt to the point where it's completely detrimental to the team. So he'd have, or else he gets really sick like he did against Rutgers in that flu game, and Christian Veilleux came in to play when it was clear that he couldn't throw a basic pass. So but I will say I think as you get into the November after this weekend's game, you get into that very manageable November slate. I was like Maryland potential to be a dogfight, but it's definitely a more manageable slate in November, and I think it'll be more I think you might see Drew Allar get worked in there a little more, in preparation for him to be the guy going into 2023, and especially I think when you get to the bowl game, I would expect to see even more of Drew Allar.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Maryland, but that's contingent on the health of Talia Tagovailoa too.
Very true. I guess I'm anticipating Talia being back for that one.
If Talia's not back, I mean, like I said, I think if Talia's not back, there's a chance they're double-digit favors in all 4 of those games. And like you said, even if Sean Clifford's still your starter, in theory, those are games Drew Allar should be able to at least get 2 or 3 series under his belt in the second half as the thing is comfortable, and that could prove to be extremely vital for next season and beyond.
I saw this all over social media. I didn't look into it. Just didn't have the time, didn't care that much. But what happened in this tunnel situation at the big house? What was that all about? Peanut butter sandwiches, whatever. What the hell was going on there?
Seems to depend on who you ask, really.
Okay. So.
It tends to be the case in those types of situations.
So somebody started something.
Supposedly, Harbaugh's blaming James Franklin for, I guess, holding the door, or I don't know, refusing to get away from the door for the Michigan player. I know apparently the Penn State players are throwing peanut butter sandwiches at the Michigan. I mean, I don't know. These things. I guess that is a problem with those stadiums where both players, where there's just one tunnel for both players. Like unlike Beaver Stadium, where you have the home team's tunnel and you got the visitors' tunnel, which are on opposite sides of the stadium. What a novel concept. But I'm sure, some words get exchanged, or all it takes is a couple words to get exchanged, and, stuff goes south, and all of a sudden you got a full kerfluffle going on. So, I mean, I don't know, but I'm sure Franklin didn't appreciate those comments. I'm sure he's made a note of it, and, for next year's home tilt against Michigan, could be a bit of a revenge factor in that one now.
Yeah, and these are definitely seems to be two coaches who don't like each other. This is not the first time we've seen James Franklin and Jim Harbaugh butt heads like this. And it's funny to me because, we talked all the way back to the beginning of the show. We talked about if you're Penn State, to get where you want to be, Ohio State's that mountain you have to tackle. But James Franklin's never had issues with Urban Meyer. He's never had issues with Ryan Day, but him and Harbaugh have never gotten along. And, they're two very similar personality types, which I'm sure doesn't help. But yeah, like you said, Tim, Harbaugh was blaming Franklin. If you go back and watch the video of it, Franklin's yelling at Harbaugh to just hold his effing guys back and this wouldn't happen. So in the end, I'm sure both teams definitely deserve some fault for whatever it was that unfolded in the tunnel.
Folks, you can talk college football all the time if you join our Discord. Go to patreon.com, search Mark Rogers TV, and we get you the Discord link, and you can talk college football 24/7, 365. We've got about 100 folks on there, so we've got reps from all sorts of fan bases, including Penn State on there. So jump on there, and you get my picks every weekend, as well as Steve Merrill from Wager Talk. He's 7-1 against the spread. He gives us an under the radar selection as well. So good stuff over there on Patreon. Just search Mark Rogers TV. All right, guys, is there anything else you guys would like to hit on? I don't know that there's anything else in the comments section.
I'm rolling through the comments for questions here. Oh, Dependent Fanatic says there's no shame in 10-2 at PSU 9-3 preseason. Yeah, me too, Dependent. I said 9-3.
Yeah, that's right.
Including the loss to Auburn, which, I did take my prediction the week of the game, but I remember Marty and I doing our preseason show, scheduled preview show, and I had Auburn as the other loss besides Michigan and Ohio State. You had Michigan State, I believe, Mark.
Yeah, I had the big three: Michigan State, Ohio State. And at this point, if they lose to Michigan State, I'll probably pull my hair out by the end of that game. So
I'll be right there with you, bud.
I'll be doing the post-game show freshly bald.
Yeah, that's not going well in East Lansing at all. Not really a good football team this year. All right, good stuff. We would invite everybody to head on over to Black Shoe Diaries. Check out Tim's work. Check out Marty's work. Anything particular over there that you guys are highlighting?
One thing I'll add, because I know this is something that can be tough to find. Every Wednesday on the site, I have a weekly article updating highlights for Penn State commits from the following weekend, or the previous weekend, their stat lines from their high school games, stat lines for the season. I know that's something I always used to look for and could never find. So when I started writing for Black Shoe Diaries, I took it upon myself to be the one who went and did it. So if you're ever interested in that sort of stuff, like I said, how Penn State commits are performing in their high school games, stat-wise, their updated film, all that sort of stuff, check out Black Shoe Diaries on Wednesday mornings. I always have you covered there.
I've just dropped the link in the chat, everyone, to Black Shoe Diaries, so you can just make it easy. Just click on the link, and you can go right to BSD.
And I typically, on every Sunday, I put up my position grades, post-game position grades. And then Monday, I also have a post called Turning Point, which I look at a particular play or moment from the game, which kind of determined the outcome, good or bad. So look for those on Sunday and Monday. And of course, basketball season's around the corner, so we're going to start ratcheting up our Penn State hoops coverage. And then we also got, wrestling, hockey hockey's already in season, so we've had some coverage of that going on. So if you're a hockey fan or a wrestling guy, especially, or gal. Blackstripes.com, your place to go year round for Penn State sports coverage. And on another note, if you liked what you saw from us tonight, or if you've watched us before on our previous post-game shows and you haven't done so already, please like and subscribe us on the Penn State Voice of College Football channel. We're at 543 subscribers as of right now. Our goal was to try to hit 550 by the end of the month. It's 5 days to Halloween.
Month, Tim, we can do better than that. Let's push it here. Here we go. So we got like 100 people here watching right now. We're at 102. We'll probably have about, 1,500 to 2,000 watch this video. And I'll say it like this. So I've got a lot of practice, Tim, in pushing these channels. We got 25 of them, and we've pushed about 15 or 16 to 1,000. And so what the deal is, folks, is that if you like what we do here at the Voice of College Football, and specifically with Penn State, but even if you're not a Penn State fan, if you just enjoy what we're doing, regardless of who you root for, it just helps us if we can grow these channels. And so even if you're not a Penn State fan, if you could please go to the Penn State channel, and I'll grab the link, go to the Penn State channel and subscribe there. And even if you're an Ohio State or Michigan fan and that makes you sick to your stomach, I've said this before, we've had Miami fans subscribe to Florida State and Notre Dame and all sorts of cross-pollination of fan bases just because you guys are so nice. And so I'm going to ask for it again, that you would subscribe to the Penn State channel. And then you know what? Once we get to 1,000, if it really sickens you to be subscribed to a Penn State channel, once we get to 1,000 and we're safely over 1,000, go ahead and unsubscribe. That's fine. Just get us to 1,000, because what happens is YouTube takes us seriously at 1,000. They want you to get to 1,000, and then they'll start pushing the videos out into traffic. They'll start to promote them, and that's when the channel can really take off from there. So that's what we're looking for there as I search for the channel. But that's Tim, I appreciate you bringing that up, because yeah, we would like to get that channel moving along there. Absolutely. And we appreciate
it's
these.
Definitely gone up like a good amount since, I'd say, the summer. So
I cannot find, I even put in, no wonder. We should I'm not able to find the channel link if I just search it. That's a problem. I wonder if it's on the front page of the main channel. So anyway, we appreciate everyone. So if you could go to the Penn State channel, but I would like to make it a lot easier for everybody by getting you to the Penn State channel, and you could subscribe right there. Absolutely. All right. Is it on the... I'll have to move it up the featured list of channels here on the front page of the main channel is what I need to do. Absolutely. All right. The Daniel Hemry says, I can't find the Penn State channel. You know what? Fair enough. I'm sorry, Daniel. I can't even find it myself. I did a Google search for it. All I came up with are a bunch of our videos of Penn State, and I even put channel, which usually pops it up there, but was not able to come up with it. So I will, as soon as we get off here, I am going to put it on the featured channels. I will put it in the #1 position on the featured channels on the front page of the main channel. And we would ask that you would please subscribe. So Tim, thanks for bringing that up. I appreciate it. Catch these guys after the game. Oh, Marty, I know what you brought up was recruiting. So is there anything before we take off that's in the mix, whether big recruits visiting this weekend or just guys that you're looking at right now that may announce a decision or anything in that direction?
Yeah, well, 1 second. Okay, I believe I found the link to the channel and just sent it to you on Twitter, Mark. So double check. I think I tracked it down. I could be wrong though, but yeah, last weekend, obviously a huge recruiting weekend for Penn State with the whiteout, one of the biggest recruiting weekends of each and every calendar year. And now you get to double that up with Ohio State, which is also a big recruiting weekend coming to town. Definitely a lot of wheels in motion. Linebacker Kavion Keys, one guy to watch in the 2023 class. currently committed to North Carolina. When he committed to North Carolina, Penn State finished second. He visited Penn State for the whiteout and has since scrubbed all his social media of all and anything North Carolina related. In today's world, usually social media tends to tell you which way a commit or a player could be leaning. So that could be something to watch. This weekend, a big player that's going to be on campus, 2024 running back Quentin Martin, arguably the top player in the state of Pennsylvania for 2024, who visited Ohio State last weekend. So looking like a Penn State-Ohio State battle there. Two other in-state guys that are a Big Ten battle for 2024. Linebacker Anthony Specca, who from Central Catholic in Pittsburgh, probably a Penn State-Michigan battle, with Penn State looking to have a slight lead right now. So that was a big name they're able to get back on campus this past
Fun fact, Marty, not to interrupt, but that's Anthony Sacca is a legacy recruit. His dad, Tony Sacca, was quarterback. Actually, his very first, when I first started watching Penn State as a kid, it's like 1991. Tony Sacca was the quarterback. So it's cool to see his son's now a highly regarded recruit.
Yeah, so that's one to watch. I said Anthony Sacca, linebacker, to watch for Penn State. It's looking like a Penn State-Michigan battle there. So, but Penn State right now seems to be in a good early spot. And like Tim said, always helps whenever your dad played quarterback for Penn State. So, at this point of the cycle, probably not going to see a lot of movement in 2023. On track to sign a really good class again. Not quite the same level as last year's, but definitely it will most likely give Penn State the best back-to-back classes they've had in the James Franklin era, which is good to see. Coming out this year and playing the way they have certainly helps with that. They've been able to start building some momentum. For 2024, one other guy I think probably should be watching closely, or two really, offensive tackle Kevin Haywood from Archbishop Wood High School in Pennsylvania. Little surprised he didn't commit this past weekend when he's on campus. Probably will be in this class sooner rather than later. And 4-star edge rusher Jalen Harvey from Maryland. Every pick on each recruiting service is for Penn State. He visited last weekend. He's coming to campus again this weekend. Definitely seems to be like a when, not if kid there too. So definitely a lot of wheels in motion on the recruiting front. And whenever you can have a whiteout one weekend and then host Ohio State for big noon the following weekend, that sets up for back-to-back chaotic weekends for this recruiting staff. The Alan Zamidases and the Andy Franks of the world, for people out there who are hardcore Penn State fans and know the rules they play. Next Monday, they'll be breathing a big sigh of relief and ready for Penn State to be on the road for a week.
Very good. Appreciate everybody being here at the Voice of College Football. And again, we have left a link to the Penn State channel in the chat. Thanks, Marty. And you can subscribe right there. Just grab the link. We've left it a few times. And please subscribe to our Penn State channel. And again, even if that drives you nuts, you hate that, just get us to 1,000. We can get there soon. We've done this before with a number of channels. We can get there like soon, like in a month, if we get everybody on board to do that. Account 22, thank you for that. Daniel Hemry, thank you for that as well. All right, Tim, appreciate you being here. Marty, thank you so much. You guys are great. Appreciate you doing the post game. You guys check out their post game. We will promote it all over the place, but Marty and Tim are going to be right here with Penn State, Ohio State post game after the big game. Thanks, guys. Good luck.
Absolutely.
Yeah, appreciate it, Mark.
Always
good.
good.
And check us out on the post game show, folks, after